It started with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that creeps into the spaces where love used to live. The kind of silence that sits at the dinner table like a third guest, heavy and uninvited. I had noticed it growing, almost like a shadow behind every "I love you" that no longer felt warm. But whenever I asked what was wrong, his response was always the same: "Leah, you're overthinking again." That was his favorite line. "You overanalyze everything. Just relax, okay?" And for a while, I believed him. I had to. When you're in love, especially with someone like Nathan, you second-guess your gut to protect your heart. Nathan was charming, handsome in an effortlessly clean way. The kind of man who could talk his way through a hurricane. He was my safe place. Or at least, he used to be. We'd been married for 4 years. No kids yet, but we had plans. Or so I thought. A cozy house just outside Seattle, shared Spotify playlists, grocery lists on the fridge, little rituals that made us feel like a team. But slowly, the rituals changed. His phone was always face down. Weekend work trips became frequent. He started sleeping with one earbud in and his back turned toward me. My friends said I was paranoid. Even my therapist suggested that my past abandonment issues might be coloring the way I saw Nathan's behavior. So, I dropped it. Smiled more. Picked up his dry cleaning. Booked him a surprise massage. I clung to the pieces of normalcy like they could fix what I didn't want to admit was broken. Until that night. He was supposed to be in Portland. A last-minute conference, he said. I made plans with my best friend Justine to grab sushi and wine. We were halfway through our third laugh about high school heartbreaks when Justine suddenly stopped mid-bite. Her eyes widened, staring at her phone screen. "You're not gonna like this," she muttered. She turned the screen toward me. It was Nathan. At a restaurant. But not in Portland. Here. In Seattle. With a woman. And 2 kids. The timestamp was from just 15 minutes ago. I stared at the image, my world tilting ever so slightly. It wasn't just that he was lying. It was that he had built an entirely different life, while sharing mine. Justine placed a hand over mine. "You okay?" I wasn't. But I nodded. What followed was a whirlwind. I started connecting the dots. Nights he claimed to be at work, he wasn't. Trips out of town, fabricated. I dug deeper, called the hotel he was supposedly staying at. No one named Nathan Brooks had ever checked in. 3 days later, I followed him. I felt like a stranger in my own body, tailing the man I had promised forever to. He drove to a quiet suburban neighborhood, far from ours. Parked casually. Walked up to a red brick house. Rang the bell. And then, a woman opened the door. She was pretty. Warm smile. She hugged him like it was the most natural thing in the world. And then 2 little kids ran to the doorway yelling, "Daddy." I couldn't breathe. I backed away slowly, numb, before I was seen. When I got home that night, Nathan walked in like everything was fine. He kissed me on the cheek, asked what was for dinner. I just stared at him. This man. My husband. And all I could think was, who are you really? I didn't confront him that night. I needed more. I needed proof. And 2 days later, I got it, from her. The day after I saw Nathan with them, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just froze. The version of my life that I had been nurturing for years, our weekend brunches, our anniversary scrapbook, the baby names we had half-joked about, felt like scenes from someone else's film. I wasn't living it anymore. I was watching from the outside, and the movie had taken a dark, bitter turn. But I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. So I played my part. I smiled when he asked about my day. I nodded as he explained that his work trip had been exhausting. I even made him tea that night. Chamomile, his favorite. The mug trembled in my hand as I gave it to him. He didn't notice. He never noticed the small shifts. But I had started noticing everything. His phone passcode had changed. He showered the moment he got home. He started wearing cologne again. And the final dagger? A strand of long blonde hair caught in the collar of his coat. I'd never been a jealous wife. Suspicious, yes. But I trusted love too much to go full private investigator. Until now. I couldn't get her face out of my mind, that woman at the door. The ease of her touch, the warmth in her eyes. The way she leaned into him like she had every right. Who was she to him? Who was he to her? I needed answers. So I turned to the only place I knew he'd underestimate, his laptop. He always thought I was terrible with tech. He joked that I couldn't even sync the Bluetooth speaker. But I had learned a thing or two over the years. And now, I was learning everything. There were 2 folders hidden in an encrypted folder labeled Receipts. They weren't receipts. They were photos. Of birthdays I hadn't attended. Of children blowing out candles. Of Nathan wearing a paper crown and kissing her. There were emails. School schedules. Even a shared calendar. The man I had married wasn't just cheating, he was married again. To her. For almost as long as he'd been with me. My stomach turned. But something else caught my eye, a document labeled, Final Will, Portland. It listed both women. Both families. He had written us both in. I was no longer just heartbroken. I was furious. I copied everything to a USB drive and locked it away. If this ever turned legal, I'd need it. But even more than justice, I wanted truth. I needed to understand what kind of person could split their life like that and pretend nothing was wrong. I started therapy again. Not to fix my marriage, but to fix me. To reclaim the woman who had become a ghost in her own home. In our next session, I finally said it aloud. My husband has another wife. The therapist blinked. I know how that sounds, I added quietly. But it's true. And then the tears came. The kind I had swallowed down for weeks. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the shame. The humiliation of being second in a story I thought I had written first. And yet, part of me still wanted to understand why. Why live 2 lives? Why lie so deeply that you forget which version of yourself is real? The next day, I followed Nathan again. Not because I wanted more evidence. But because I wanted to meet her. I needed to see her not from the shadows, but eye to eye. The morning I decided to meet her, I didn't wear makeup. I wanted her to see my real face. The one that had been smiling through lies, kissing a man she unknowingly shared, crying in silence while he texted her from across the room. I waited until Nathan left for work. I knew where she lived now. I had the address, the neighborhood, even the name, Emily James Brooks. Yes, she hyphenated it. She wore the last name he gave me, too. The walk to her house felt surreal. My heart thundered, but my steps were calm. I rehearsed every line I might say, how to explain who I was without sounding crazy. What if she already knew? What if she was okay with this? I rang the bell. She opened the door with the same warmth I'd seen days ago. Blonde hair tied loosely, dressed in yoga pants, holding a cup of coffee like any normal suburban wife. "Hi," I said, voice shaking. I need to talk to you. About Nathan." She froze. Her smile dropped. And I knew instantly, she didn't know. 30 minutes later, we were sitting at her dining table. Two wives. One truth unraveling between us. The shock on her face mirrored mine from days ago. I could see her struggling to breathe, the world tilting beneath her. Her fingers clenched the mug so tightly I feared it might shatter. "He said he was divorced," she whispered. "He said you were just someone from his past. That you wouldn't let go." I looked away. My throat closed. "No," I said quietly. "I'm his wife. Legally. Still am." She put her head in her hands and let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob, more like a deep, guttural ache. The kind that only comes when your reality cracks right down the center. Then came the kicker. She turned to me slowly and said, "Leah, I think you should sit down for this." My stomach tightened. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. And the room fell silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. She was pregnant. With his child. It was as if the universe had twisted the knife a little deeper. Not only was I the abandoned wife, I was now the other woman, unknowingly. That night, I didn't confront Nathan. Again. Not yet. Instead, I called a lawyer. I learned that bigamy laws are complicated. That justice is slow. That what he'd done wasn't just betrayal, it could be criminal. But more than that, I learned how deeply I'd lost myself. I had built my world around a man who was never fully mine. Meanwhile, Nathan continued pretending. He left home with casual kisses on my cheek. Told Emily he had late meetings. Neither of us confronted him outright. We both needed time. Time to figure out what we were, individually, and what we would become. Emily and I started texting. Strange, right? But there was something comforting about talking to someone who understood. We weren't rivals. We were victims of the same lie. She sent me photos of him with their kids. I sent her screenshots of the will with both our names. We weren't trading proof. We were piecing together the same broken puzzle. And the deeper we dug, the darker it got. There were rumors of another woman, years ago in Austin. Same charm, same pattern. It was as if Nathan had been perfecting this dual-life act for decades. We weren't the first. Would we be the last? I stared at the woman across the cafe table, trying to breathe. Her voice was calm, but each word she spoke felt like glass shattering inside me. "I'm his wife," she said again, as if I hadn't heard it the first time. I had. I just didn't want to believe it. Her name was Kayla, and she had dark circles under her eyes that mirrored mine. She wasn't glamorous or showy. She was real. Worn down by the same confusion and emotional exhaustion that had taken over my life these past few months. I asked her, "How long have you been married?" She blinked. 6 years. My heart plummeted. 6 years. That meant when I met Daniel, when he took me to the coast, held my hand in the moonlight, promised me forever, he was already married. To her. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a life I'd built on lies. She slid her phone toward me, showing pictures of their wedding, their home, their family trips. Daniel smiling like he had nothing to hide. Daniel hugging her just like he had hugged me. I felt the room spin. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. No. I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. That night, I confronted him. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I just held up her photo, trembling. "Who is she?" Daniel froze, and for the first time since I'd met him, he was speechless. "That's not what you think," he finally whispered. I waited. I let the silence do the work. "She's someone from my past," he said. "We've been separated for a while now. We just haven't filed the paperwork." His lies were unraveling now, sloppy and inconsistent. "So you're not still married?" I asked. He hesitated. And that hesitation told me everything. I stepped back. "All those nights you said you were working late. You were with her." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. My voice broke. "You made me feel crazy. You told me I was paranoid. You made me apologize every time I questioned you." Daniel dropped his head into his hands. "I didn't want to lose you. You already did." He reached for me, and I flinched. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "But you did. You hurt both of us. You built 2 lives, and you let us both believe we were your only one." I walked out of his apartment that night with my chest caving in. My hands were shaking, and my tears burned hot. The worst part? I still loved him. Even after everything. And that made me hate myself a little. There are moments when truth doesn't hit you like a punch, it creeps in like fog. Soft. Slow. Suffocating. That moment came for me on a Tuesday afternoon. Emily had sent me another photo, this one from their recent vacation in Colorado. Nathan, laughing, holding a little boy who looked exactly like him. Emily had captioned it simply, "He said this was a business trip." And just like that, I realized something horrifying. That trip had been during our anniversary. I stared at the photo, my hands trembling. The snow. The mountains. The exact same time I had been planning a surprise dinner, baking the cake he never came home to eat. He'd claimed food poisoning. Said he passed out at the hotel. I thought that was the lowest point. It wasn't. Later that evening, I was organizing a file cabinet, trying to declutter my life when I found an old folder labeled Leah's Loan, 2019. Curious, I opened it. Inside were contracts, forms, and a signed application for a loan. A large one. But here's the thing, I never applied for it. Nathan had. In my name. The blood in my veins ran cold. I read the entire file twice. He'd forged my signature, submitted my tax records, even faked email correspondence between me and the loan officer. My stomach twisted. That loan had been used to buy a second car. One I never saw. But I had seen the car. In Emily's driveway. Everything started connecting. Nathan hadn't just betrayed our hearts. He had used my identity. My credit. My future. It wasn't just emotional damage now, it was fraud. I called Emily instantly. When I told her, she didn't speak for nearly a minute. And then her voice dropped to a whisper. "Leah, that car, it's registered in my name." "What?" She repeated it, slower. "He said he bought it for me as a wedding gift." I saw the papers. They were signed under Emily Brooks. That name. It wasn't her legal name. It was mine. I had taken his name when we married, Emily never had, but she thought she did. He used both of us to manipulate banks, registries, taxes. He had forged documents. Set up fake accounts. Created parallel lives that financially fed into each other. And all the while, he played the loving husband in 2 homes. It wasn't just deception anymore. It was a calculated scheme. Emily and I sat together the next day at a quiet cafe, armed with paperwork, timelines, screenshots, photos. We made a list of everything he had taken from us, not just emotionally, but legally, financially, professionally. She'd lost out on career promotions because he didn't want her traveling. I had deferred going back to school because he said we couldn't afford it. And now we both knew why, because Nathan was living 2 lives, and paying for neither. But then came the final twist. Emily handed me a manila envelope. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this," she said, eyes red. "But I think you deserve to see it." Inside were copies of 2 letters. Dated before I married Nathan. One was an apology note. The other? A restraining order, filed by a woman named Cassandra L. Wilkes. I blinked. "She's from Texas," Emily said. "He was engaged to her before me. She filed the order after he emptied her savings and disappeared." I stared at the paper. The signature. The words. My hands shook. Nathan had done this before. We weren't his only victims. We were next in a long line. I looked up at Emily, who was watching me like someone standing on a cliff, waiting to jump. Not in fear, but in readiness. "What do we do now?" I asked. She didn't blink. "We expose him." It all came to a head on a gray Thursday morning. Emily and I had spent days building our case, paper trails, timelines, loan documents, bank transfers, fake email threads, even photos of gifts Nathan had duplicated between us. Every piece was a breadcrumb in a twisted maze that led to the same man, Nathan Charles Walker. We weren't just betrayed lovers. We were victims of calculated manipulation. And now, we were witnesses, too. The plan was simple, on paper. We would meet Nathan together. In public. Safe, visible, controlled. We'd tell him we knew. Show him the evidence. Ask for an explanation. Record the conversation. Let him expose himself. But of course, nothing about Nathan had ever been simple. He agreed to meet at a quiet lakeside cafe we all knew. He thought it was just me. Emily stayed hidden at first, seated a few tables away, wearing sunglasses and a hooded coat. I had a recorder tucked in my coat pocket, heart thumping like a war drum. Nathan arrived late, as always, smiling that same charming smile he had used to fool 2 women for 5 years. He hugged me like nothing had happened. That was the last time I let him touch me. As he sat, I placed a printed photo on the table, him holding Emily's son, standing in front of their house. His eyes twitched. Then I laid down the loan documents. My forged signature. A copy of the marriage certificate from Texas, his 3rd marriage. A whisper passed over his face. His fingers curled into fists. "What is this?" he said, voice low. "Controlled." "Truth," I replied. "And Emily's listening." She stood up from her seat and walked slowly over, her eyes locked on him with a look I'll never forget, not anger, not sadness. Clarity. Nathan's face paled. "You lied to both of us," Emily said. "But it ends today." He stood up, towering over us, but for the first time, I didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He didn't fight. He simply said, "You don't understand, we understand everything," I interrupted. "We know about the loans, the fake accounts, the forged names. We know about Cassandra. The restraining order. The trail you left behind." Silence. Then, Nathan walked away. No denial. No apology. He just walked. And that was the scariest part of all. Because men like Nathan don't need drama. They disappear. They vanish into the fog they create, and leave you wondering if any of it was ever real. We filed a report the next day. Fraud, identity theft, financial abuse. Our evidence was airtight. But legal battles are slow, and emotional healing slower. It wasn't about getting back what we lost. It was about owning what we learned. Weeks later, I got a message from a woman named Rachel. She had seen our story online. Emily had posted about it anonymously. Rachel had been dating Nathan for a few months. He had just asked her to move in. She never replied to him again. We saved someone. Maybe more than one. That became the quiet victory. Emily and I didn't stay close. Some scars don't allow for friendship, they just allow for understanding. But we parted knowing one thing, we weren't broken. Just better. Because we'd seen the worst in someone, and chose not to carry it in ourselves. It's strange how a single conversation can break you open, and somehow, begin to heal you too. After Nathan walked away from the cafe, after Emily and I sat in stunned silence staring at the empty seat he left behind, life didn't snap back into place. It stretched. It bent. It creaked like an old house in a storm. But it didn't collapse. We filed our reports. We made our statements. The legal side took over with cold precision, paperwork, affidavits, banking disclosures. A lawyer told us Nathan was facing multiple counts of fraud and possible prison time if the charges stuck. But none of that gave us closure. Closure, I learned, doesn't come in the form of punishment. It comes in acceptance. Emily returned home to rebuild with her son. She told me one day, in a quiet message, that she no longer felt ashamed. That was enough for me. I took time off work. Traveled. Sat by myself in places where the silence was louder than my thoughts. And slowly, I started to let go, not of what happened, but of who I had to be while it was happening. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't dramatic. I was right. And I would never apologize again for listening to my gut. 6 months later, I stood outside my new apartment, holding a potted plant and a letter addressed to myself. It was part of a healing practice my therapist recommended: write a letter to the woman who doubted herself, the one who loved a lie. Here's part of what it said: you didn't fail. You survived. And that makes you someone worth loving, especially by yourself. I still remember the day I ran into Nathan's sister at a bookstore. She recognized me immediately, even though we'd only met twice. She looked nervous, guilty. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "He fooled all of us." I smiled, genuinely. You don't need to be sorry for someone else's lies. It was the most freeing sentence I'd ever said. A few weeks ago, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. No signature. But I knew the handwriting. It simply read, "I was never worthy of your trust. I hope someday you forget my name, but never forget your own worth. Nathan." It didn't bring tears. It didn't bring rage. It brought a quiet peace. He was gone, but I had stayed. And that was my victory.